Hello! Welcome to Reimagining Star Wars, where we like to review some Star Wars and create our own Star Wars. We like to reimagine it. But tonight we're reviewing in preparation for Season 7 of the Clone Wars. And, and I'd like to introduce
My bad.
introduce Santa once again in the new year. He's come back from delivering presents, and he is here, and he's going to introduce us to. We're doing this chronologically, by the way. So the first two episodes we're reviewing is 116 and 216, and then we're going to go into the movie, and then after that we're going to shut down for a little bit. And if you follow the link that's going to be in the bottom, then you will go over to Santa, where we'll finish his channel, where we'll finish 301 and 303 for the night, and then next week we will continue to follow this chronologically through, and we'll be doing quite a few episodes through this week to get us ready for February 17th for season 7. And we're going to get you all up to speed. So if you don't have time to watch it, you can watch this. It's probably going to end up being about 3-4 hours, maybe 5 hours worth of content when it's all said and done. But it'll be shorter than if you just watch the whole thing. Maybe not as enjoyable, but shorter. And we're going to walk you through where we think the best episodes are, whether we think that they did a good job in telling that story per arc, and then we're going to tell you where the characters ended up by the end of each piece, so that you can be prepared when season 7 comes out for where the characters are and where they're going. So with that, without further ado, Santa.
Again, Happy New Year, everybody. The Clone Wars animated series, first of all, for me, is what kind of redeemed the prequels for me. The prequels I felt were a little bit off, just for me personally. And by connecting with the Clone Wars animated series, it filled in a lot for me. There's a lot more character development. You get to introduce more into Dooku and what he's up to. You get introduced into Grievous, what he's up to, and you really see Anakin's arc as he develops more. And just as the Magic Maker just said, we'll kind of cover the character arcs as we go along. So tonight, as we enter in, we have season 2, episode 16, and season 1, episode 16. Both of those, the chronological order, I think they can be interchanged. One doesn't lead directly off the other. For me, I think it better is to go from 216 to 116 than to the movie, because 116, season 1, episode 16, ends right as you're getting into the theatrical release. So, season 2, episode 16 it's labeled or titled Cat and Mouse, and it's a bit of a guerrilla warfare kind of thing where Anakin is using a vessel that has cloaking technology, and this is the first time. And Magic Maker, you'll have to help me out here. It's one of the only times I'm aware that we see cloaking technology in the series. Now, I know that it exists in like the Thrawn novels, um, but I haven't seen it utilized in any of the movies for sure. But I don't know even within Clone Wars that they revisit it.
Yeah, I can't remember it being revisited. It's used in Legends, so I mean, I think they brought that in there, and of course, it's talked about in Empire Strikes Back when he says, a ship that small doesn't have a cloaking device. So that lets us know that there's cloaking devices in Star Wars, and
Yeah.
and so I think the biggest one, this one, is that they clearly highlight that cloaking devices have been used before on other ships, and they talk about that. And I'll let you continue.
Yeah, they absolutely. So they talk about being in larger vehicles, just as you just mentioned, larger ships, and it's unusual for a ship the size of Anakin's in to be cloaked, which sort of takes them by surprise. The other interesting thing is the guy they're fighting against in here, Admiral Trench. He has had former battles not only with other cloaked vehicles, vessels, and successfully destroyed them, but he's also had previous battle with Jedi. So he has a history fighting against Jedi in the past, and also um, with cloaked vessels. So I thought that was an interesting backstory for Admiral Trench, and it begs a lot of questions. So it raises some questions in my mind, like, well, where were these battles? What was going on? Why has this guy been fighting with Jedi before? Where does this come from? Was he part of the 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 separatist movement? He seemed to be in this episode maybe more of a freelance guy, but perhaps he was part of the separatist movement. Um, but
Well, the way I took it was that we're not starting off. This is not the first battle of the war, and I think the intro gives us that clue that they're continuing to fight. So we've started somewhere in the middle of the war, even though they say it tracks out 3 years. It's clear that there were some battles before this, and this guy was supposedly, he's very good at what he does, and
he is. He's very, very good. A tactical genius, if you will. Um, One interesting thing, and I wanted to bring this up just for discussion between the two of us here, and of course in this stream, is that part of the story, Trench has to take down his shields in order to fire on Anakin. And when he takes his shields down, they lower their shields, and then he tries to raise them up again, but he can't raise them because they have to be recharged. They have to cycle. And I thought that was a little bit odd, only because they shut them down, and you would think through a normal shutdown procedure you could raise them again, but in this case that wasn't, and it led to his defeat, which would seem neat. With such a tactical genius as Trench was, that to take your shields down is, and knowing that you can't get them back up in due time, would be uh, something you wouldn't readily want to do.
no, yeah, I agree. I'm actually, to me, it was one of these things. It's actually one of the things I think there's some military type flaws, like a misunderstanding of how like the military works, kind of thing. So there's I mean, I think this is a kind of a theme in Star Wars actually, and it's maybe I just never really noticed it growing up because they stay kind of vague through the OT, and the movies don't deal with it enough for you to really pick it apart. And so for the first time, we're dealing with Jedi and clones and droid armies, and so now military formations and tactics, have to be portrayed fairly accurately. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be brilliant or anything, and it doesn't mean that they have to go into detail, but it means that it has to be consistent. And to me, this is an example of an inconsistency. And the reason I say that is because you've pointed out clearly a flaw of somebody who knows a ship. If you're a brilliant admiral, if you're a brilliant commander of your ship, you know the capabilities of your ship. Now, I understand why he had to drop the shields, just because he was firing missiles, and so I don't know if it seems to me in the Clone Wars that whenever they fire anything through, the technology can't let it through. Now, I don't know if like in by the time we get to further along in the Empire period, like they've figured out cycles so they can like open windows or cycle the speed so they can fire through the recycle rate of the shields, for example.
Right.
So like maybe like a
Like a
time,
timing belt on a prop plane.
right, a
Right.
timing chain, exactly. So you can fire your gun through the prop, right, through your
Right.
machine gun through the prop.
Right.
And that was something that was, of course, figured out, by us in World War I. So it doesn't take a lot of technology to figure that out, right? It's just timing.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and so to me, those kind of things. So if you can equate something to World War I technology, it seems like you could equate that and think through that in the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have any trouble at all shooting the laser cannons through the shields. Maybe it was because of a timing thing, but we don't really know. But when they did take down the shields to fire those, I was shocked that it took so long to get them back up.
Right, and
And
it definitely kind of goes in the face of where we understand it from, like the video games, for example. And I'm not saying I know that video games don't necessarily run the same mechanics of a movie or a show,
right,
but I mean, if you ever played X-wing during the '90s, you could cycle your shields from front to back and and build
right.
up, right?
That's exactly right. And then I would understand too if they were taken out, right? So your shields are taken out. You've got to
Mm,
recharge them.
right,
You've got to pull from the ship's energy banks to be able to get them back up.
right,
But it's almost like if you put your computer on sleep, right? When I go to start it again, it's already on. It just needs to fire up.
right. I'm
And
assuming the
it's almost
shields have
like,
some sort of projectors, and
yeah,
some sort of field creator or something like that. So
yeah,
really, all you're doing is saying, "Hey, turn off the projector, turn off the field generator," and you're leaving the capacitors charged up. So that
yeah,
as soon as you go, you just flip the switch and they immediately start projecting. Now,
exactly.
that said, we did see the shield later on. On Christophsis later on as we go into the movie, where
Yeah,
that's a big key too, is that the shield is a big key, and that shield generator it grows, and so and they can't fire through it at all. Like neither side can fire through the shield generator,
that's
and they're
right.
using it to get closer to the cannons that are blowing apart the of the Republic cannons, so they can get to those and blow them apart right with their tanks.
Right,
And
right. And so that's a good point. It's just that it worked for the plot of the show, and it's not a major thing. I think there has to be some just enjoyment, right? Just to say this is a fun show to watch. We enjoy being there, but when you do start to nitpick it, it seemed like a fairly major plot hole, and that in actual situation, he would have been firing those laser cannons to perform a bit of a defensive barrier as those missiles went through, and you would have immediately, as soon as they fired, had started back up that shield generator.
right, I mean
But
you track your own missiles so you can fire where your missiles aren't. I mean,
yeah,
it's not to me that would be. I mean, like we have capabilities today, and and where we're just using ballistics. So, I mean, if you think about like a phalanx gun, like it fires over 3,000 rounds a second and
right,
shoots down missiles, for example.
right,
And if we fire our own missiles, our phalanx doesn't shoot down our own missiles because they're tracking our own missiles.
right,
You know.
right. So you fire a sidewinder, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to shoot it with your own cannons.
Right. I mean, it's tracking incoming versus outgoing.
Yeah.
So,
So
of course, I understand. I mean, you can't really equate our earthly technology with Star Wars.
yeah,
Um,
and I
I think World War II, World War One technology should be with some lasers and shields is really where we are in Star Wars. I don't know why it's there. I can't tell you that. It's a fantasy. So
yeah,
so you're going to have to suspend some of your military logic. That said,
exactly.
I still expect characters to act logically, and if you know that you have the capability of knowing that your shields are going to take time to recharge, for
Yep,
one, and
yep,
two, you also know that you don't have shields on that side, so you want your cannons to be at full power,
yep.
firing at anything just in case, right?
That's right, and you're exactly right. So here we got Admiral Trench. They established in the show that he has prior experience combating Jedi. They established that he's destroyed other vessels with cloaking devices, and that he's a bit of a tactical genius. And so we know that coming in just in a short episode, and it's the first one. We learned that very quickly, but yet he makes this huge tactical mistake that costs him his life. Right?
Right,
It
and
costs him the
it's
entire vessel.
that's right. It cost them the entire vessel. Really cost them the entire siege, and
It did.
and and so and it's all about not knowing your own equipment. I mean,
Yeah.
and so
And as you mentioned, we talked about other vessels within Star Wars where they're able to cycle shields to to the rear. We've seen that in the Falcon. We've seen that in X-wings. We've seen that repeatedly where they push all the power to the rear shields or to the forward shields. And you would think that as you're releasing these torpedoes, these missiles, that you would just lower that bank,
Right.
right?
And then you
And
immediately cycle it over after they leave.
if you needed to, if it takes that much time, you could roll the vehicle
Right.
in space.
Right. I think it would take a long time for a capital ship to roll comparatively. But that said, you should still be able to cycle your shields,
Yeah.
back over there. I don't think you'd be bringing them down. You're just cycling them and you're moving them. And you're going to move your projectors where you need, because
Right.
it allows you to put the most shielding where you need it. So if you're facing another capital ship, it's going to put out a lot more firepower than, say, three fighters. Not saying that three fighters couldn't do a lot of damage, but comparatively, the damage is more coming from the other capital ships. So you would cycle your shields to that portion to have the strongest of your shield generators or shield projectors in that direction. And that's kind of just a layman's understanding of if you've just watched Star Wars that you'd start to pick up.
Yeah. The other thing, and it's just not to belabor that, would move on. There was a line in there that made me smile. It's early on in the show. They say, "Help us, General Kenobi. You're our only hope." Uh, that's obviously Star Wars does this all the time, and you look at the Rise of Skywalker and some of the complaints about it being too fan servicey. I say uh, baloney because it's part of enjoying it, right? It's just
Right.
they say this quote. You're like, oh, come on, no, I love it. It's entertaining. It made me smile. I chuckled, and you take it for what it is. So I'm not going to be overly critical, like it's being too cheesy or anything like that. I liked it.
I actually do not think that when they reuse a line or reframe the line from a different character or whatever, that is too fan servicey. It to me is it means that if you've paid attention to the movies and you like to make the quotes, they have just given you acknowledgement that, hey, we recognize your love and knowledge of the franchise. And to me, it's a uh, dialogue tie through everything. It just shows you that people use the same vernacular wherever you go, and that would be true if you're in the South, if you're in Ohio, if you're in New York. Guess what? People use the same vernacular,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and it shows you that it is a combined world that where people use similar vernacular wherever they go. That's what it
yeah.
says to me.
So overall, the episode was good, but it's not one of the best ones. It's not one of my favorite, but it was a good episode, and I enjoyed it. So that's just my summary of Cat and Mouse. Um, don't know for you. Is it generally good? Is
No,
it feel?
I have. You brought up the one question. I have two military questions, and
Okay.
and the question still it always comes over from Phantom Menace too, and if you're and I always ask this: if you're blockading a world, why do you always blockade at the equator? Wouldn't you blockade the entire world?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because space is linear.
Because it's like being on a road, right? It's not 3D by any means. It can't just come in at the pole.
Right,
Uh,
right.
Anyway, just that's a nitpick, but I mean it's just one of those things I noticed, and
Yeah,
so the
it's
Phantom
almost
Menace was
like
the same way.
it is. And the other thing is, planets tend to be like singular environment,
That's right, one
right?
biome.
Yeah, it's a desert planet. The whole thing is desert,
That's
right?
right.
Like, yeah. So anyway, that's it was a good show. Moving on to season 3, episode 1, as you just mentioned, there was a mention in season 1 or yeah, season 1 16. I'm sorry, wait a minute. Season 2 16 is where we just reviewed. Season 2 16, they do mention the battle that's going on in Christophsis. Season 1 16 picks up at that battle.
Right.
So we come in, Christophsis under attack, and it's the tie-in between Cat and Mouse and the theatrical release. And the name of it's The Hidden Enemy. And essentially what goes on in this episode is there's a mole within the ranks.
Right.
There's a spy among the clone troopers. And it costs them some tactical advantage. And they find out that the enemy is already at their doorstep, and they didn't know how they knew every move they were going to make before they made it.
Right.
So there's a couple of things that happen here, and one of them is that you have really the heart of the guy that's the mole. At the end of the show, he says he wasn't fighting so much for, or he wasn't doing this for the money, the pay. He was coordinated with Ventress, right? Ventress was his go-between, but he wasn't doing it for money. He was doing it for freedom, is what he says, and he even says that the other clones are slaves of the Jedi. That's how he sees it. So you start to get the impression that these clones, some of them anyway, are starting to become self-aware. They're becoming to have some sort of autonomy, some sort of individual thinking, and this guy has gone the path of saying he wants out.
Right. Good as a point of view, Anakin.
Yeah. Well, at least he feels like there is no way out.
Right. I mean, so like he's chosen a side, and he sees that many of them don't appreciate the clones as individuals. We see some of this later on. And we won't get into it yet, but I mean, by 301, definitely see why this is so important. I mean, it's clarified why this is so important to this guy, of why he perceives them as just following the master's orders, as if they're the slaves, like they're not cared about, and so it definitely, I think it starts to bring in the doubt of who really is the good guy, right?
Yeah, and it plants the seed for, as you mentioned. We're going to talk about the Clone Cadet series 3-1, season 3, episode 1 in a bit, but it plants the seed here, where it says, "Wait a minute, are these guys actual guys? I mean, they're not just automatrons, right? They're not cloned animatronic beings.
They're not flesh robots."
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. They are flesh and they are humanoid, right? They are people. And to what degree is their service subscription versus, can they get out? Is there a way to say I resign my position? Is there a way to get out, or are you truly enslaved? Is this any matter of free will involved here? That's what this episode really kind of plants the seed for that. It doesn't directly attack it head on. It just kind of plants it there, because the theme of the episode is they're fighting against the separatists, and there's a battle waging, and they're fighting for their lives, and they're finding themselves attacked. The episode is very action oriented. It's not this heady, but when you start to, then the question at the very, very end, and it's posed right at the very end, he says that he wants his freedom, and he mentions that the clones are slaves to the Jedi. And I thought, wow, wait a minute. We've seen before where Jedi are kind of guilty of looking the other way when they run into slaves. We saw that with Anakin on Tatooine, right? He frees Anakin, but Qui-Gon Jinn even says, "I'm not here to free the slaves." Right? So,
as confused Matthew used to say, "What kind of Jedi are these?"
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we've seen them that way, but here, this Sergeant Slick, right? Sergeant Slick said he flat out accuses the Jedi of being the slavers. It's a great question. I think as far as like
Mhm.
for the fandom, for fans, if you watch this episode, it raises a great question for discussion afterwards. Are
Right.
the Jedi slavers?
I
I don't
think it's
know.
shown. I think really these kind of things show the depths to which the Jedi have gone and how they really don't consider. I mean, it completely. And I will go into that in just a minute. But I mean, it's like it's kind of interesting how they do look the other way. Like there's a level of which they think maybe it's like it's a necessary evil kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
and so. And when you do that, you're definitely not pure. So it's um,
Yeah.
so there's an aspect to them that I think shows and they obviously didn't get there overnight. That's not something they started with. So you know, it shows that they've had a degrade in their moral code in a way, and
Yeah.
uh, and so the things that would have made them, I guess you could say objectively good, don't exist anymore, and that allows, of course, Palpatine and 3 to say, the Jedi and the Sith are more alike than you might think. I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact quote.
and for Yoda to even kind of say, wait a second, we've kind of gone blind.
Yep, exactly.
The other interesting question that comes into this just is on methods. So I put this down as a note. When some people see problems with a thing, right? So this guy, this Sergeant Slick, sees a problem with the system. Rather than try to change it from within, he tries to destroy it from within
Right.
by trying to tear it down, and he thinks that's the way out. Um, I find that interesting when we talk about the fandom today,
Yeah.
the Star Wars fandom today. There are people who are actively rooting, if you will, for the franchise to completely fail. Now, I'm not going to say that there's a large number of people, but if you spend any time online, you can find them.
I think it's larger than we think.
There is a group, and
Mm-hmm.
they're actively cheering failure.
Right.
And I get why, right? It's the same reasoning, right? They see a problem, they think that it's broken, and rather than try to address it, and I'll use it, and I've used this before. Thor Skywalker is the good side of, like, he sees a problem and he elevates it and he talks about it a lot, more than I would prefer. But anyway, he talks about it a lot. And
about right, maybe not enough for me, but that's okay.
understood. I mean, for me, he is what's good for the fandom or for the franchise as a whole because he's critical, but in a constructive kind of way. And he's not trying to tear it down. He isn't rooting for Star Wars to fail. Right?
Right.
He wants Star Wars to get better.
Right.
And that's great. And that's going to help people like me who love the sequel trilogy, who like the Last Jedi.
Right.
If the Last Jedi were better or different in a way that satisfied the fans that were disenfranchised, if you will, it wouldn't have hurt me. I would have been a good movie. I still would have enjoyed it. So he makes a lot of very valid points, and I think he's great
Right.
for the franchise from that perspective. So you have those types like Thor Skywalker that want to build up, they want to fix from within. There are others like Sergeant Slick who want to see it torn down.
Right. They think that there's some nebulous way that it can be returned back to the way they want it to be. They want it torn away from those who have it in control and sent back to the way to who they wish were in control.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and so they basically want to say just do away with the Disney canon and give it back to George Lucas. Well, bad news. It ain't going to happen, and the guy's probably going to be dead in the next 10 to 20 years.
yeah. Well,
And
they honestly didn't want, there were some of them, and I saw them before the Rise of Skywalker come out, who thought that it would not get the same box office as Little Women. I saw that. I saw people saying that they thought
right.
Little Women would have bigger box office. I was like, wow, you're really rooting for it to fail.
Well,
Like if
I
it,
mean, I like Ichibaka. I like reading his stuff on thing, but he thought it wasn't going to do as well as Solo, and I was like, Yeah, I think that's wrong.
But they're, and I get why they want that to happen. They're not different. Like I said, they're not different than the Sergeant Slick. He sees a problem, right? He sees a problem that they've got free will and they've got this that the Jedi are the slavers, and then he wants out, but he feels like there's no way out. Um, and so they come at it from that standpoint. They want it to be better. They want
Right.
their freedom. They want things to be better. But they think the best way to do that is by destroying what exists so they can
Right.
be rebuilt from
Do you think maybe he was a stand-in for prequel haters?
That's a great question.
Because you know what? I mean, it was pretty bad then, too.
It was very bad.
You know? I mean, I hate to admit it, but I was one of them. I would say that I was bad, almost as, I won't say I was as bad, but I mean, I was pretty bad. And so I've come around now. But, I mean, I didn't hate George Lucas because of the prequels. I didn't,
Well,
but I was definitely one of those that if you asked me, did you enjoy the prequels, I would have said no at that point in time.
Yeah, I was too. And like I mentioned at the very start of the stream, the Clone Wars animated series helped heal me, right? It helped.
Oh, same here.
So he very well, Sergeant Slick very well could have been a stand-in for the let's use the term that's popular, the toxic fans.
Right.
So he may be the toxic fan.
He was the toxic clone.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. So the episode kind of stood out to me that way. The hidden enemy, and I like what it sets up as we get into Clone Cadets later.
So yeah, I mean, so it's a little meta if you think about it. So he's actually setting up a situation where if we think that maybe that's true, that they're the toxic fan, the toxic clone, and that wants to tear it down from the whole thing, and not liking the fact that Star Wars is a slave to one man or one company.
I'm telling you, it says that. Right. And it kind of hit me. And it may be just because of the state of the fandom today.
Right.
That I'm more aware of it. But like you, I lived through the prequel hate period, and I was one of the negative people. I wasn't down on Lucas. He made me mad. And he still makes me mad. McClunky. He makes me crazy. Yes.
I can totally agree with you. I love Lucas. I have a love-hate relationship with Lucas. I love him and hate him all the time. It's like, why did you make that change? just leave it alone.
So that's my review of both Cat and Mouse and Hidden Enemy.
All right.
So we'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, well, let me kind of speed through the movie, and so that we can go over to Santa and his channel. So the movie, of course, picks up with the Battle of Christophsis, and so we're starting off in the initial bit, and where I talked about the shield and the cannon. So what we have in the beginning of this is we have an assault on the actually I forgot a portion of it, but so the intro to it is, of course, that Jabba the Hutt's son has been kidnapped, and that they tell you the only ones he has available to do this are Obi-Wan and Anakin to do the mission, and that's where we find out. So out of all the 10,000 Jedi, we only have two, which are our main characters, Obi-Wan and Anakin, who are in the middle of the battle at Christophsis, and so we have this point where and then we immediately go to that battle. So and then we pick up there. They're fighting the droid army, and these guys are all lined up as if it's a Revolutionary War. And I was sitting there thinking, like, okay, this is probably the silliest way, but I guess we get it portrayed fairly quickly and succinctly that there's a battle going on, and it's definitely not like modern warfare, even World War II or World War I for that matter. And so it's very interesting the way they do that. I understood why it was done in the Phantom Menace. They did fight very archaically, would be the way I'd put that, the way they did it in the Phantom Menace, so I was okay with that. But now that we have entered into the period of time with the Jedi, it really doesn't make a lot of sense as warfare evolves. And that's my first critique, I guess. So military, but again, I'm looking at it through kind of a military mind, and seeing things. But it progresses through the that battle, and we're introduced to Ahsoka for the first time, and so Ahsoka is a snippy kid who should still be a youngling according to the whole thing, and so uh, and uh, and she is assigned to Anakin, and Anakin does not want her. He doesn't want a Padawan. He doesn't want to be a teacher, and Obi-Wan immediately states that, oh, well, youngling, you're my Padawan, right? So she says, nope, I'm his Padawan, pointing to Anakin. And so then this leads to a battle where, at first the first part of that battle of Christos, the cannons are able to destroy the tanks, and and the droid army has to withdraw. And then they go and get a shield, and they use the shield to push forward, and they're going to take out the cannons. And then that leaves the new Padawan Ahsoka and Jedi Knight, her master Anakin Skywalker, who she calls Sky Guy. And we get introduced to that little tidbit of or a little bit of a banter. They have to go and take out the shield generator. And in the course of that, she gets to do some heroic stuff, and Anakin begins to accept her, and so she saves his life. And matter of fact, she saves his life several times. He's a little has a little bit of an attitude about it, but eventually he begins to accept that fact that she's doing her job, and he likes the fact that she's a little reckless like he is. And then that continues on until they're able to leave Christosis, and then they end up going to I don't know what planet it was on, I don't remember, but they go to the monastery, and where they find the little slime kid of what do you call him? Slime. Yeah, it was Binky. I know it was Binky, but I can't. I hate these things. Anakin had a name for the slime something. I can't remember what it was. And
Ahsoka kept calling him Stinky.
yeah, Stinky. That's right, Stinky. And then Jabba, of course, called him Pookie Muffin, which I thought, what? So I thought the idea of Jabba having a kid was kind of odd, but so that one kind of took me back, and so then of course we find out that which we always knew that it was the Separatists that had kidnapped him, because that's revealed to us fairly quickly, and then we're introduced to Asajj Ventress, who's talking to Count Dooku. Of course, they end up being led into a trap to get it, and then of course they're ordered. Asajj Ventress is told to kill Stinky and make it look like the Jedi did it. And then, of course, Padme eventually gets involved as well, as she tries to, as Jabba believes that it's Count Dooku uses this opportunity to convince him that it's the Jedi who set this whole thing up and actually kidnapped the kid, and then she goes and then Padme gets involved to try to negotiate with Zero the Hutt, which is the uncle of Jabba, and we find out that he is, of course, the one, along with Count Dooku, who has orchestrated this whole thing so that he can take over the Hutt space and supersede Jabba the Hutt. And then eventually, of course, at the end, they fight with both Ahsoka in the monastery, or not Ahsoka, with Asajj Ventress in the monastery. Both Anakin and Obi-Wan at different points. Anakin eventually finds the Twilight and takes that to Tatooine, where they are delivering Stinky to Jabba the Hutt. Before they get there, they have to fight Count Dooku and the droids. They split up in order to facilitate that, and then of course Jabba's going to kill them even after they hand over Stinky, And then we find out that, of course, then Padme saves her life by revealing that it was a plot by Zero the Hutt. And then they get the treaty so they can pass through Hutt space. I'm not really sure what Hutt military they have. So how would they prevent them from getting through Hutt space? That was my main question.
Yeah, I think the Hutts were crime lords, right? So it would have just been through their strong arm tactics, right?
I mean, I would assume. How are you going to stop a military from moving through your space if you have no military to stop them?
Right, right. Like think about whatever crime lord gang that you want
Right.
In Chicago during the 20s or New York,
Right.
wherever. What could they have stopped the military from marching through?
Right. I mean, let's just say Al Capone would.
Right.
Did the U.S. military need permission to pass through Chicago into Michigan? I mean, it's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you know.
That's a good point. That's a good point. No, I don't think the Hutts had any military might at all. I think they were just, held the underworld, right? Like
Right.
they controlled the underworld, and I guess they could control money. Maybe they had the goods on some people.
Right. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it was clearly they have. They said they wanted access to their hyperspace lanes, and I don't know what they could have done to stop that.
Yeah,
I mean, I mean, to me, like, okay, if you have a military, then you send your resources out after it. And the only thing it seemed to be is that they had mercenaries and bounty hunters, and didn't have any organized military.
right.
And
Like I said, unless they've got the goods on some people, right? So maybe they've got within the Senate,
right.
certain politicians they can make life bad for them.
So unlike other people, I actually liked Ahsoka straight off the bat. I think
I
she's
did too. I liked her straight off the bat. I liked her quirkiness. I liked her. She gets the nickname honestly right off the bat because
right.
she's snippy. She says things she shouldn't say, and she gets called out on it.
Right.
I like her.
No,
I like her from the get go.
I do too, and maybe it's colored by the fact that I already like her. But I mean, like I was watching and going, no, I would have liked her. I like her right now, and I like this. I like this version of Ahsoka right now. I like the arc that she has. That she's when he says, "Well, you're a youngling," she says, "Well, maybe I am, but Yoda thinks I'm old enough to be a Padawan," and that is something that she needs to prove not only to Anakin but to herself that she's able to handle this. And
I'll tell you something else.
I like that.
Maybe it's just my age. I, for me, any more kids are people who are in their 20s because I'm that old now. And
I'm getting there.
I've dealt with college age students who come in as interns, and they think that they know everything. They come in, at least at my experience, in a corporate environment. You get these college kids, they're a business student in some prestigious college. They come in and they're the top of their class, and they come in and they think that all of a sudden that they're ready to run the place as soon as they come in, and you kind of have to knock them down a little bit, like calm down. So I see Ahsoka come in. She's a young kid, but she's full of confidence. She just knows that she can do it, and she doesn't know what she doesn't know yet.
Right.
Like there's a point in that movie where they're going through, and she wants to kill the droids that are like assembling behind them, and he finally says, "Well, if it's bothering you that much, go ahead." And so she knocks out a bunch of them, but she misses one that he kills, and he's like, "Yeah, you missed that one." She's like, "Oh." She tries to cover for it, but
right.
He has to knock her down a little bit here or there to say, "Yeah, you're a good kid, but you still got some stuff to learn."
Yeah, and she also tries to assert that she's in charge of the clones too with Rex.
Oh, that was good too.
And
absolutely.
And she's like, "Oh, but I'm a Jedi, so I'm technically in charge." And
He's
Yeah.
like, well, experience counts a lot. And she's
Yeah, well,
like,
I outrank you. He says, well, experience in my book outranks
yeah,
everything.
I know everything, which is true. And in the military, I was an enlisted soldier. Uh, when you got a brand new first lieutenant, second lieutenant, somebody like that, they might be in charge, I mean, by rank. But I'll tell you what, they listen to their first sergeants and they do what those master sergeants have because those guys have years of experience and they, keep them out from getting in trouble.
No,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, so like when I was a boot lieutenant, of course I had been an NCO prior to becoming a boot lieutenant, but when I became a boot lieutenant, I had I had to have my NCO walk me through. I mean, I actually wanted to step into the NCO role multiple times as a boot lieutenant because I'd been an NCO. It's what I knew, and and I had to be taken aback and saying, hey, this is not your role anymore. But the same thing is true here. So like I saw lieutenants when so when I was a company commander, I saw lieutenants who wanted to step in and control everything, and you're like, listen, you're paired with a senior platoon sergeant for a reason. I mean, your platoon sergeant's going to take care of you. Let him do it. All right, learn the ropes. It doesn't mean you don't plan. It doesn't mean you're not doing what an officer's supposed to do, but you don't have the experience to understand what works and what doesn't work. So when you come up with your plan, run it by him. He's gonna go, that won't work, sir. We did this in A, B, and C, and you're just gonna get us killed.
all right.
And
So for me, Ahsoka came in just like that brand new kid.
and she's the brand new boot.
She is. That's how I saw her. She didn't offend me. She didn't come across as, too Mary Sue, which I know a lot of people thought initially. She didn't come across to me like that at all. She was an overconfident kid. Thought
Right.
she could do anything. And she had to be taught, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right. I think she came in thinking that she had to do all this stuff to prove she was. That's how I perceived it. Not she was overconfident, but that she was trying to project confidence for something to make up for the fact that she was actually really scared. And that's how I took it because she's repeatedly defending herself. Oh, Yoda thinks I'm old enough, and then she thinks that Anakin rejected her. She sits down and she thinks that well, I failed, and I'm not gonna be a Padawan. And she sits down there, and Anakin sits down, and was really awesome. Well, you're reckless, and you probably wouldn't make it as Master Kenobi's Padawan, but you might make it as mine.
It's a great way to close this show. That episode was fantastic.
Right.
The other thing that I really love is you saw a little bit in the TV show before, but the relationship between Obi-Wan and Asajj is great.
Oh yeah, I like that.
They are gold. When they're together and they're fighting against each other, they're fantastic.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do better than that, my dear.
yeah. They have this just the relationship between the two of them is fantastic. I love it. I love every second of it.
Die, Jedi.
Yeah, it's always my dear this and my dear that, my love, but they're trying to kill each other.
I know. they always flirt kill. It's a flirt attack.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
It was good, and I like the fight between Anakin and Count Dooku. That was really good. I really liked what they did with the sand. That was really awesome. With the sand, he blew him back, and he picked that sand up like in a vortex. I was like, that's really cool use of the Force. I like that, and so it's kind of like dirty fighting with the Force.
yeah. It was wonderful. And everybody knows Anakin's relationship to sand.
Right, of course. So it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was interesting. It seemed like Anakin did beat Dooku there, though. He jumped on the speeder and left Dooku behind instead of killing him. And which, if you think about it, they're trying to get the Dooku's the leader, and they're trying to get the Hutts on their side. But Anakin chose to go after his Padawan to save her versus end the war almost instantaneously by killing Dooku.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of makes you go, with that one. But it shows his what's going to lead him. It definitely foreshadows to what's going to lead him down to the dark side. He's more concerned about
Well,
personal thing. Like he's not willing to make a decision to not help Rex,
well,
and it's Ahsoka that points out.
Yoda straight out says that the main lesson that he needs to learn, and really the reason he has Ahsoka, is because he needs to learn to let go. And Yoda tells Obi-Wan, that he's taken this Padawan on, and he's doing very well. The bigger problem will be can he let her go?
Right. No,
And
absolutely.
that's what he needs to learn.
Yeah, that was really brilliant. I mean, I really liked it, and how they set it up. So I mean, I think right from the very beginning, even if you didn't see the whole series, but you saw that movie, you were kind of at least let you know that Anakin was having problems letting things go, and that this is what was leading him to the dark side. And of course that's true. We see that with Padme in Revenge of the Sith, even though it seems to happen really abruptly. But that's why this series helps so much, because you start seeing the change. Of course, we're going to see the change of Anakin, of course, across the series. And I'm really looking forward to season 7, because I think we'll see the final part of that change that's going to make watching Revenge of the Sith not seem so abrupt.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. Revenge of the Sith. You're supposed to buy in, like you just switched. And,
All right, so any critiques? What did you think? I mean, we've gone over the characters. I've given my critique on what I thought about the military stuff, but other than that, it's.
No, I remember when I watched the movie thinking it was not what I wanted. I was a bit down on it originally, but rewatching it, I actually liked it a lot better.
Yeah,
I don't know
I did
why.
too. I agree with you. I did not like it. I saw it in the theaters in 2007, and I really didn't like it. I walked out disappointed, and I guess maybe because I was down on Star Wars a little bit at that time. Maybe that may have colored it.
Yeah, and I remember buying the DVD when it came out just because it was my duty as a Star Wars fan to own it. you know, by golly, I'm going to own this thing. And I bought it, and I was just, I don't know that I ever watched it on the DVD. Maybe once. You know.
So, all right. Well, with that one, let's close this out, and we'll head over to your channel. So, hey guys, in the link below is Santa, his link. In 30 minutes, we're going to pick up, and we're going to go over 301 and 303, and then come next next week, we're going to cover the next season. It's going to be chronological, so we're going to go through the rest of season 1, and that's mostly season 1. There's a few breaks in there, but mostly season 1 for that. But we'll follow this chronologically, and we'll pick up next week. But for in 30 minutes, we're going to pick up at Santa. So we hope to see you over there. And if you haven't already, when you get over there, subscribe to Santa, because if you don't, you're going to get coal next Christmas.
Very good. Thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully you'll come over and hear about Clone Cadets, probably reimagining in my a Magic Maker in one of our favorite episodes of all. We'll talk about that and supply lines. So join us over there in just a bit.
All right. See you in 30. All right, Santa. See you over there.
Okay.